how long can you survive in a toxic environment? Well, you stay sick if you're in a toxic environment that's poisonous. You got to exit the environment or remove the carcinogen from the situation. So I think dealing with fear and what's going to happen in a trade-off, which is now a trade-off I'm not willing to make. The trade-off was um, I'm aware of their problems, but I'm just going to keep ignoring them and kind of learning like, man, uh, it's not worth it.
Welcome to another episode of Negotiate Your Best Life. I'm Rebecca Zung, and I'm so grateful today to be bringing you Sean Cannell. He's an international speaker coach, and he is the guy for knowing how to start, grow, do everything you want to ever do with YouTube. He is the founder of Think Media and the host of the Think Media podcast. He is one of the leading online video experts and YouTube strategists in the world. His YouTube channel has over 2.5 million subscribers, and his videos have, I think one of them has over 150 million views or something like that. He has a book called YouTube Secrets, the ultimate guide to growing your following and making money as a video influencer. And I cannot wait. I just actually got had a whole conversation with him. And this is going to be really, really fascinating because he also has dealt with all sorts of adversity in his life, including some narcissists. So this is going to be a fascinating conversation for all of you. So thank you for being here with us.
Rebecca, thank you so much for having me on the show. Grateful for that introduction and to be hanging out with you and your community.
Thank you. So, wow, you've had really an interesting life. You got married super young. You kind of fell into this whole world of YouTube and everything. But tell us a little bit about your background, your life, and how you sort of ended up here.
Yeah, I mean, here is a weird place. I actually just celebrated my 40th birthday, so I just turned 40. Think Media, our company is about 30 people, 40 if you count contractors and some different vendors that we work with. So we're running a multi-million-dollar company, kind of approaching 8 fig a year, and co-founded by my wife, Sonia, and I. She is our CFO. I am now the functioning CEO. I don't love that. I like being a founder more. I want to hire a CEO probably ultimately for those functions because I'm also kind of the main content creator in a lot of videos. And so I'm wearing multiple hats. So it's wild where we are today. So like, how did we get here? I kind of have no idea. I mean, I could tell the story, but it's like I'm a small town kid, college dropout, growing up. Actually went through kind of some intense trauma. My parents got divorced very young. My dad got a little abusive, some drug addiction. So my mom was a single mom for a few years, and that was very hard time. I have less recollection of some of that, but there's definitely some memories about how hard we were living in a basement that we were renting from a family, and she was working so hard. And then eventually she married my stepdad, and had kind of a decent kind of childhood growing up, but eventually got expelled from Christian high school. Actually, once my parents recovered from financial troubles, they sent me to a private Christian high school, and I got expelled right before my senior year for just crazy stuff, rave drugs and all this different stuff I was doing. And I broke enough school protocol that I got expelled. And so I actually got very depressed and just finished out my high school diploma at a local school, and eventually hit rock bottom from just partying and being really kind of in the wrong circle and doing the wrong things, which was really good because it was able to bring me to a place where, man, I need something different. I need something different. And I eventually went to Bible college, for just 1 year in Canada randomly because some of my family members had gone there. And then I got plugged into a church internship. And this was right around 2001 or two. And you mentioned I kind of stumbled into video, and it was the youth pastor that said, hey, I just interned so I could stay out of trouble. Coming back from Bible college, I still loved my friends. I knew though that I didn't have very much self-discipline, that if I was sitting in a circle with them, which actually happened on my break from Christmas, my Christmas break for Bible college, we were sitting on a circle. I thought I have strong discipline, and they were passing around a blunt of marijuana, and I was like, "No, I'm good." The first time, and then the second time, I was like, "I'm good. I'm just, okay." The third time, I was like, "Okay, just pass that, pass it." So it's kind of who you're hanging out with matters. Like it influences you, and you probably only have so much willpower. So I was like, "Man, I need to just stay busy. I want to let people know, hey, we can hang, but hang in my terms and in my environment. I'm going to get really busy." So I was working, interning at this church, and I didn't even really know. My parents just started going to a new church. I knew nothing about the church. I didn't know if I liked the church. The youth ministry had like 12 kids in it, and the youth pastor said, "Hey, make videos." And this was before YouTube started, 2003. So I really started to learn that skill. First YouTube channel we started was in 2007 for the church. So fast forward to today, lots of windy roads on the journey, but I've now been doing video for 20 years, YouTube for almost 17. And so there's something about just going deep and continuing to go in the same direction and being obsessed with continuing to learn, level up, practice, experiment, get better, and really focus for that long of time on sort of this idea of video marketing, and YouTube.
Wow, there's so much to unpack with all of that. I mean, to have been through all of that and then found your way back to church at such a young age. I mean, things could have gone very, very differently for you. I mean,
Absolutely, they could have gone differently. I mean, the path I was on, I was very into kind of like rap music culture, the lifestyle glorified. So it's kind of and a kind of a pretty shallow life if it's about sex, drugs, and rock and roll kind of a thing. But I was so grateful that I sort of had a wake up call and an epiphany of that, leaving me feeling pretty empty. But then what changed everything for me was that 1 year in Bible college was good because I studied the Bible cover to cover for myself and really started to get some stronger foundations for my faith. But when I started interning in that church, it was really mentorship. The youth pastor, Jeff Moores, was just at my birthday party. He's now a church planner in Oceanside, California, Rhythm Church. He's who got me into video. But not only was that powerful, but just watching him in his marriage with his wife, Erin, watching him then become a father, helping him bring a lot of healing into my life from different maybe father wounds and mentorship, and also needing kind of that tough love, kind of having both someone who unconditionally loves you and encourages you and builds you up, but then also calls you out and challenges you and calls you to another level. So honoring personally to both of my parents. I love my biological father, my stepdad. The collective ingredients from both of their lives have so influenced who I am today and any success I've had. And I am empathetic to the fact that we're all inheriting whatever we inherited from the previous generation. Hopefully, whatever their ceiling was becomes our launching pad. And so grateful for both of them. But there was so many aspects that I needed mentorship in as a man. And I've had many mentors kind of over the years, of course, through books or podcasts and things like that. But people like Jeff Moores or different people that have crossed my path. And I think that was critical. I mean, watching him as a leader and helping him call me on my blind spots and a lot of things like that. And those foundational ingredients and a lot of stuff I learned in the local church. YouTube is one thing and YouTube marketing is one thing, but how do you run your life and how do you run a team? That has been something that a lot of I've seen now content creators that are finding success, they have no clue. It starts being, how do you build a team though? I mean, how do you actually hire? It's like the E-Myth Revisited is a very powerful book, and it's about you like do the thing. You're the technician that has that special skill, but doing the thing is radically different than building a team around the thing. It's one thing to know how to bake delicious cupcakes. It's a whole nother thing to run a cupcake business. And so I've been on a journey of trying to figure out not just how to be a content creator, but now how to be a CEO. And with a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old now, been married 18 years, life is absolutely total mayhem. And so trying to figure out how to juggle it all. And so all those life skills and interpersonal skills and all that kind of stuff, just mindset and energy management and all these kind of things is the journey that we've been on lately.
oh my goodness. So did you meet your wife back at church then, or because you were
So,
pretty young?
so when I was going to that church, they had a ministry school called Soma Northwest, School of Ministry Arts Northwest, that I enrolled in instead of going back to Canada for my second year at Prairie Bible Institute in Alberta, Canada. Jeff convinced me to go to Soma Northwest instead. Probably also because he's like, this is a young leader that I want to keep in the youth ministry, but also probably because what was cool about this is rather than maybe more traditional curriculum, it was much more hands-on leadership development. And I think that was the right call. I think I even heard recently that only a few people can learn really well from audio and reading. Some people learn better if you also add the visual, but what everybody learns from is like kinesthetic, where you actually are hands-on.
Yeah.
And that's the best form of learning something. So being in a school of ministry arts where we're studying in the classroom, but then when we're executing every single week on building a youth ministry, running events, dealing with leaders, if you will, recruiting, negotiation, like you're in the real world. It's just actually, and I heard Robert Kiyosaki offer of Rich Dad Poor Dad say that exact same thing. He said that doing an internship or interning at a company or for a person that is doing the thing you eventually want to do is one of the greatest places to develop real world skill sets, not necessarily traditional education in a lot of cases. So saying that, we joined Soma Northwest, and it was not just young people, it was also kind of anybody in the church. They may have had a career, so maybe they had to go to work at 9 or something, and so the start time, it softened over the years, but the start time of my first year was 6 a.m. You had to be in the classroom at 6 a.m. In fact, if you were not in the classroom at 6 a.m., they would lock your door and make you sit in the hallway. And the justification was there are people in Africa that have to travel hours to get water and bring it home, and they'll make it. And I was I was like, is that real? Like, have you met any of them? But they were like, yeah, you can be on time. Because think about, so all that to say is that gives you a little idea of how hard the culture was, like no excuses. So I always had to get there at 6 a.m. And I was also very busy waiting tables, also trying to, pay the bills as a young adult. And I would get up at 5 as a result and go to Starbucks to try to do a little bit of homework, try to have kind of a little devotional time, get my mind right, and actually be awake by 6 a.m. So I get some coffee. And that's where I met my wife. She was a barista, and Starbucks in Marysville, Washington, right off of State Street, was very not busy at 4 or at 5 when I got there. So I would come in, I would see her. I started to notice, man, she's so cute. She's kind of cool. Started to get to know her. She was dating somebody at the time. And, but I kept going in, and she, in hindsight, would say, like, who is this guy who's coming in, cracking his Bible, 3 days a week, and studying, like, what is his story? I came to learn that at the time she was in a sorority at the University of Washington studying for law. And
Wow.
she was background was Seventh-day Adventist. And she, though, was kind of getting sucked into kind of college culture and all that kind of stuff. And so she kind of had those roots. And at that moment, she wasn't really pursuing God or pursuing church or anything like that. But her interest was kind of piqued by this character. And so what, funny side quest was, she broke up with her boyfriend, and I wanted to get her attention. And I was a little bit coward. I mean, I was kind of like a womanizer in high school, but now since I like met Jesus, and my heart was really changed and, shifted. And I was at it now, I didn't really have that same confidence. So I was afraid to even ask her out. I remember one day I wrote my number on a drink stir stick, and I chickened out and I threw it away instead of giving it to her. So I was trying to figure out, like, how do I approach, maybe asking her out or something. And I found out that she was into running. And so, true story, I was like, what if I put on running clothes? I'm not even a runner, but I'm like, what if I put on running clothes and then just went in for Starbucks, as I would, because I would like to visit her sometimes multiple times a day, just to see her. And so I walked in and, came up to the register and put in an order for coffee. And she looked at me and she's like, wait a minute, like, are you a runner? And I was like,
Oh
well,
my gosh. So it
well,
worked.
I mean, what does this say to you? And she was like, we should go running sometime. I'm like, absolutely. And then I was terrified because I was like, what if my endurance is so out of, different from hers. What if I'm going to lose right from the start? But what was funny is we jogged for a little while and then we ended up just walking around the Arlington airport and getting into conversation about life and everything else. And kind of the rest is history. We dated for about a year and a half, and now we've been married 18 years.
There you go. It worked.
Yes.
You still have those running clothes? You have them
I know,
under
framed.
glass and
The funny thing is I'm actually a legitimate runner today as a hobbyist,
there you
but
go.
I wasn't in no way consistent as a runner, but it worked. It did work at the time. At least it got her attention. Hey, and you teach negotiation, dress the part. Hey, sometimes
That's
dressing in the right
right.
clothes can open the right
Actually, that
doors.
is a chapter in my former book, Negotiate Like You Matter, is dress confidently. You should dress in the part. So
Yes.
it
And
worked for
I
me.
tried to dress the part in it, I negotiated the deal.
You did. You did. Well, but the one of the opening lines of my podcast is sometimes the very first negotiation that you have to do in the morning is with your own self for your own self-worth.
Mm.
And that is one of the things that you said that you had to overcome. And I want to know, do you agree with that? What do you think about mindset when it comes to negotiation or dealing with your day?
Man, it's mindset's been, I agree with it 100%. I am a small town kid, and I think that sometimes growing up in a small town can make you small minded. I think that sometimes growing up in a small town, I encourage people these days. I say, just because you have a small YouTube channel, you still need to dream big. But that's hard because sometimes your circumstances don't fully align with your vision, but your circumstances can make you think smaller. They can constrain your life. So how do you expand your mindset? How do you? There's been some influential um, things along the way, different mentors. Early on, there was a guy named Dr. Dave Martin. I did kind of a millionaire mindset program, is and actually incredibly helpful, and sometimes I think even that can get criticism. Because people go, okay, can you really think and grow rich? And you're like, well, technically, no, because you do actually have to execute, but officially, absolutely, because it's going to have to start with your thinking. So if you can change your thinking, you could truly change your life. And so there was some early stuff. I think one of the other big things for me was I discovered a book by Hal Elrod called The Miracle Morning. And I started to change my mornings, realizing that if you can slay the morning, you could slay all day. And
Mm.
if you can wake up, I've heard some people call it a prize fighter's morning routine. And I have absolutely learned. I think that some of maybe my fans or people who watch our content maybe doubt that I deal with insecurity, self doubt, negative thinking, discouragement, depression at times, and that sometimes it's a daily battle, and that waking up, having practices to get into the right state, the right mindset, but the right emotional state are essential. As a person of faith, there's a verse that says David encouraged himself in the Lord. And so there is something about learning how to encourage yourself, how to shift your perspective, shift your mindset. And Hal teaches in that book, he just collected practices like scribing, journaling, meditation, silence, reading, a little bit of movement and breathing, not intense exercise, but a little bit of exercise. And so I've adapted a lot of those things. And then there's another book called The Big Leap that talks about the upper limit, and that we will hit. Our mindset can also be like a thermostat, right?
Mhm.
Where or our environment around us, it's like the lottery winner, that you won the millions of dollars, but you didn't change your mindset, your belief system, your operating system, and so you found your way back to being broke again because you hit an upper limit, your money limitations, your self-worth limitations. You didn't know how to steward it, you didn't know how to manage it. So my awareness of discovering some of these signposts along the way, and then the implementation of trying to not just one time, in a way, reinventing myself, but having to continually do it. And now every year in our company, thank God, it's kind of like mo money, mo problems. Uh, and it's nice. It's a nice problem to have. but there's whole new limits. Like, what does it mean to actually now, what leader do I need to be for a team of this size? What kind of leader do I need to be to run a team of this size? And also now be a father of a 3-year old or 1-year old? What kind of husband do I need to be? And even as we speak, dealing with stuff that I'm seeing coming up, and my wife and I are in counseling and dealing with stuff where I'm realizing as I age now I'm having kids, and stuff starts coming out of maybe from my childhood that I didn't even realize. So I agree with you. I think it's a constant um, work in progress. The Jim Rohn may have been famous for saying the quote of something like, working on doing well at your job will make a living, but like working on yourself make a fortune. Personal develop, I don't know, self development. And so I've always been a big investor in self development and things that can build up my mindset, negotiate with myself, and get my mind right. A lot of days it starts wrong, so I'll go through a practice to kind of get into the right place. Think about what meetings I have ahead, and that's what leaders do.
Oh, so much gold in what you just said. So much gold. I was like trying to take notes on the books and things that you were talking about. I always say that I have so much respect for what you just said about you and your wife, because I always say that in every relationship, whether it's you and your spouse or anybody that you're with, that there's always 4 people in a relationship.
Mm.
And that is your true selves, you and the other person's true self, which is the one from God, which is the one that was created by God, which is perfect and whole and from love, right? And then there's the trauma selves,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so there's the 4 people really. And it's in any given moment, there's who's going to show up in that relationship, who's going to speak, who's going to dominate, who's going to respond, who's going to act, who's going to interact, who's going to react. And then, when that happens, then that other person also has that, in that gap after that other person has spoken, there's that moment of how is that other person going to respond and who's going to show up? Is it going to be that true self, the one that was, created by God, or is it going to be the trauma self? Because the trauma self wants to go, I'm going to say something hurtful and I'm going to, right? Because the trauma self was created in a moment of childhood to protect and defend and survive, and says things that are hurtful and never usually does things that are really good for anybody. But, and at the end of the day, they think that they're protecting. And by the time, you're an adult, you have to look and you have to acknowledge that trauma self and say, thank you. Thank you for your service. But I appreciate you, but I don't think I need you anymore. And you're not helping me anymore.
Yeah, no, that's very powerful. And I know I'm 40 years old, but you start realizing, man, we're a work in progress. But that's our wife and I, my wife and I are very passionate about counseling. We've done it over the years. We've gone years without it. But I'm a big believer in, in athletics and in sports. Not all amateurs have coaches, but all professionals do. And the highest level athletes have multiple coaches.
Yeah.
So thinking about if we want to have a world-class marriage, and we're in business together. So
Yeah.
we co-own the business and we're running it as it grows and gets complex, and you deal with other personalities and all this different stuff. And we have different gift sets. So it adds a whole nother layer of pressure and challenges to navigate. And you add in running a business together, and you then add in the kids, and then you add in your trauma selves. And
That's what
so
we
we
had
need
together.
coaches.
My husband and I used to have our law practice together, and it was like you could never get away from work either.
Sure.
You're at your anniversary dinner and you're talking about, work stuff.
We were. That is exactly. We actually at my birthday, just the two of us at Bellagio. We went to the Sphere in Las Vegas, went to some nice meals, and ended up having, among other many magical and memorable moments, also a couple long conversations about like our event next year and our speakers. And
Yeah, and it's like, okay, we got to not do this, right? You can't be talking
yeah,
to clients or whatever it is. And yeah, I mean, it can be that way. And so you've also dealt with some difficult people, some narcissistic people in work situations that have been pretty traumatic for you.
yes.
So, and I think some of our listeners can definitely identify with that. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, we dealt with, we've had a lot of different people now work at Think Media. We've learned different things along the way. And I think actually I learned from you the term covert narcissist. I had heard the term narcissist, but I probably had never had a conversation about it. I wouldn't know how to define it. And so I kind of learned that if you don't really know what you're looking for, it's a little bit harder to spot. I also um, think that probably one of the most challenging things for me to work through growing my business was generally I lean towards being passive. My biological father was um, uh, is kind of naturally passive, very charismatic, kind, very always like kind of socially wants to be liked. I know that's also like I want to be liked. So one of the struggles over the years was like shying away from difficult conversations, crucial conversations in general. And so one of the things we learned at our company is we have had, people come and work here, and I've had to learn to address difficult situations and have crucial conversations. And so that was a big piece. I think then the other piece was what was your work. In fact, I stumbled over an Instagram of you talking about narcissists, and I started being like, wow. And it was almost like whether wool was pulled over my eyes, and I feel somewhat complicit because maybe I allowed it. But even I started seeing like sometimes that's sort of part of the magic that kind of surrounds them, is you sort of get tricked, you gaslighting or whatever, you kind of like, is it me? Like, it's probably my fault. Like, I don't know. Like, and so it was a really bumpy season. And as we were kind of figuring things out and what it equipped me in, I'm happy to, talk about whatever else you want and we could go deeper. But one of the flip side is, again, you have, even my wife and I running this company, small town kid, college dropout, and dealing with different personalities, team scaling, learning how these are like some of the skill sets. Even, by the way, the hiring process, because sort of like as teams are growing early on in a business, it's like, are you alive and willing? All right, you're hired. Like it's that's like your system, and thus you're not as seasoned, nor do you have as many tools. And then even learning and continuing to study things like culture. And what's interesting is, in hindsight, I could have probably seen the signs more, but I also realized that sometimes um, we definitely have blind spots, or that if someone's producing, that could be one big thing. Like, well, but if they're producing, or maybe they're even like actually hitting like generally their targets in terms of, and maybe even beyond, but obviously toxic to the culture, and now verifiable from multiple accounts and multiple other people. And maybe they treat you a particular way, but there's ways they've treated other people, which is now not only verifiable, but seen over time. And if you're still turning a blind eye to it, that was some of the stuff I had to deal with as a leader, was thinking about, you can't, you have to address situations eventually. Of course, and that no team member is worth any amount of money if you lose culture. They're not worth, no, but it doesn't matter how good or how skilled they are. This is where I am now, is that the right behaviors, health, organizational health trumps everything. Our team directors now, we just read The Advantage this year by Patrick Lencioni. Subtitle is Organizational Health Trumps Everything. And going through being able to have crucial, radical transparency on the leadership team, being able to call each other out. One of the ways we kind of learned is that people who are uncall outable or get offended or fluff up if they get called out on issues or whatever, get mean or get just different, it happens once, maybe I'll start as a bad day. If it's a pattern, like you got to go. And so we have now, ultimately, I try to stay grateful at all times, always. And I also want to take ownership for all of my mistakes, because there's consequences to me abdicating leadership at any point on the journey too, or being passive. That's a failure in my role. I have to be active, assertive, and make the decisions and the hard conversations and address things quick. But my gratitude is, it's all learning, and it's made me better for the next time and given me more of a lens of what to look for. As we've been defining our culture and our core values at our company, one of the most helpful things to define our core values was awareness of seeing what we didn't like. I've actually said we almost didn't know how to define it, because, well, the three of us work good together. Like early days, you have like an early team, like it just works. Like we don't have core values. There's no core values written down. We're just working. But then when you introduce, I think it's like when you introduce poison, then it actually, oh, now we're experiencing poison. Like we actually are experiencing it. It's easier to define. It's easier to see. It's maybe, what do you want in your culture would be one list to write down. What do you want your family to be like? What are your family's core values? What are the non-negotiables? What are, at Thanksgiving, what's acceptable in my house? As soon as we had our own house, I used to be passive, let my parents, whatever, in-laws, they say and do whatever. Now I realize I'm the man of the house. Oh, you're going to talk to my wife that way? That's cool. I don't care who you are. This is our family. We're a whole new unit. That's unacceptable. You could either stop that right now, or we're totally fine without you, because right behavior, health is the standard here. I don't need to control what you do in your own home. I'm not even necessarily judging you, but that's not going to fly here. And so growing to set strong boundaries, to define what health looks like, and then to enforce that. And then fast forward, I also hope that our hiring is a little bit better. We use tools like Predictive Index, and some different personality assessments. And we try to use a combination of them all, try to have a hire of a couple of different people, talk to them, and I eventually talk to them. And then we're aware that you never really know until you know. I'm sure many people listening to this are like, yeah, they seem good on the dates for a while. You definitely need a few dates. You definitely need a few weeks, a few months. Who knows how long before people's true colors can kind of come up in a variety of situations and pressure to expose different issues that people can have. And so I'm not expecting us to bat 100, but we've gotten better. And we've gotten better from learning from different personality types and different challenges that we've had over the years. And it's helped us get crystal clear on how important organizational health is for us. And I think culture trumps everything. Culture eats vision for lunch. Doesn't matter how good your vision is. Doesn't matter how good your talent is. Culture will kill the whole thing if culture is toxic.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot in what you just said there. But one of the things that I really want to bring out that you said, and I just want to kind of distill it down here, is that in all of that, you took back your power, you took back your agency. And that is something that I really want people to hear and really want people to know. And it's something that I also did. You could have continued to say, I'm a victim in this. I'm a victim. Look what happened to me. Woe is me. But you said, no, I have to take responsibility for my part in this. And that's what when people can take a look at themselves and say, how did I contribute to this? There is actually, because a lot of people want to say, I had no part in this. It's all them, it's all them, it's all them. And that's all fine, well, and good. But the empowering part in saying, how did I contribute to that, is the taking back of your agency, is by saying, well, if I had a part in that, then that means that I can prevent it.
Hmm. You know, that's powerful. And I, in hindsight, one, as a leader, I make it my goal to take extreme ownership for everything. Everything is my fault in this company. And to some degree, you know, in my home, in my life, extreme ownership. I got to take responsibility. And what's actually wild, Rebecca, is this individual had said multiple things behind my back, but actually had said something about me behind my back years earlier. And a trusted friend thankfully revealed that to me. But honestly, I ignored it. And my logic at the time was, yeah, I mean, it's immaturity. That's an immature perspective. And um, like probably to my point of being passive, it was okay to be walked on a little bit. And also observing it, I thought, well, this person's up. I mean, even that they would say something like that shows that they are definitely they're insecure, maybe threatened, maybe jealous, because that is just weird. Uh, but then when you fast forward and the whole thing played out to the point of I have a part in it, are you kidding? The writing was on the wall the entire time. Like it was actually always there. There was just like little by little that I started to justify and like, you know, kind of give the benefit of the doubt and whatever. So you're absolutely right. And also became a process where in the pursuit of finally taking back my power and taking back agency, I was still kind of like, I read the entire Crucial Conversations book, like annotated notes. Okay, how am I going to do this? And I started doing a lot of what you teach, like started like kind of gathering data and thinking about like gathering different events and like verifiable moments and gathering different things that had happened. And there was, you know, and my wife similarly as we co-run the company. And so very intentional about it for us, like as a person of faith too, there's a lot of prayer and like, God, give me courage and help me grow. And so it ended up being also a very shaping thing for me because it became the very vehicle with which, you know, that pushed me to develop obviously an underdeveloped area of my life and an area that I probably would have may or may not suffered from greatly on a personal level because my wife's amazing. We got our world. Of course, what friends we allow or fake friends. I know you have all kinds of good information on that, but on a business level, it would have been fatal, or we would have just continued to repeat a cycle if I hadn't, you know, had this opportunity to expose. I can't ignore obvious things. I gotta be thoughtful. Got to have my guard up. Also, I've realized my wife is the counterpart of me. I do give people the benefit of the doubt, almost all, to a fault. It's the way I'm wired. Generally, would always see the best. I reinterpret people's actions for them, assuming their intent is good, and I reinterpret people's actions, assuming their motive is good. And I have also now learned over our years in business, not only are there sometimes toxic people on a spectrum, but there's actually evil people. We have now encountered straight up evil people, dangerous people, and I'm learning that as a father too, that's a thing that has to change. I would probably go to like kind of trust everybody, kind of just be kind, trust everybody kind of thing. And so it's also very good to learn that that's really not how the world works. And so again, always looking at how every situation in life can ultimately make us better. It can give us lessons that equip us for the future. And so this has been that for me, certainly.
Yeah, that is an attachment problem. So I don't know anything about your childhood, but I'm gonna
I'm an open book.
Go
Counsel
out.
me.
I'm going to go out on a limb and tell you that that's an attachment problem because there was something that happened in your childhood where you felt like one of your parents, there was a problem, like for survival, like they might leave or something. And so for you now, like in your adulthood, you feel like I can work harder, I can be good, I can, be better, and then I will show them how good I can be, and then they won't leave.
Mm.
And that's why you are so successful in business. And but that's why you reinterpret their actions for them because and make up for it because it's an attachment. It's an attachment issue.
Yeah, that
And
makes sense. And originally, with the writing on the wall was so clear with this situation that logical conclusions would just be like, oh, this is should have been over, but
that's
it's
why
just
you end up with leaky boundaries.
yeah, it
And
should
I'm
just end.
telling you that
Yeah.
because I
Leaky
have
that
to say,
yeah, those leaky boundaries for sure. But what was funny is, to your point, I thought, well, I'll just work harder. Maybe I can support, maybe we could support this person with counseling. Maybe we could um let on and on and on and on, which was absolutely the wrong thing. Would have been the wrong thing to pursue in this case, especially once things had already happened, by the way, and once other team members have been affected, etc. And so anyways, um
so I
yeah, I
have an
appreciate you.
alcoholic mom,
Yeah.
and that's what it is. It's because it's, if I can show up better, if I can work harder, it's like I'm bad, I'm inherently bad, but I can show them that I'm good by being better.
Mm, it's wild.
But now that you won't do that anymore.
Yeah, I like that. Appreciate it.
Yeah. And maybe other people listening will resonate too. And so by recognizing that you can take back your power and say, hey, I am no longer a victim, right? I'm a victor here. I have agency. And that's what I did too. I'm like, I'm getting out of this relationship. I'm not doing this anymore.
Mm-hmm. It's really
And
powerful. I think insecurity from a standpoint of financial as a business owner, like sometimes when someone's producing, I imagine this, you could tell me, you're
oh
the
yeah,
expert, if a married couple that you could be dependent because maybe there's a breadwinner or something. So if someone's producing, there can also just be a fear of rocking the apple cart, because as soon as you address or expose an issue, that could blow the whole thing up. And what are the consequences? And what I've learned is, do it smart, but you should blow the whole thing up. I mean, that's why my conclusion is you just, John Maxwell put it this way in the 17 laws of teamwork. It's the law of the bad apple. One bad apple spoils the whole bunch. You have to get the bad apple off the team. And I mean, how long can you survive in a toxic environment? Well, you stay sick if you're in a toxic environment that's poisonous. You got to exit the environment or remove the carcinogen from the situation. So I think dealing with fear and what's going to happen in a trade-off, which is now a trade-off I'm not willing to make. The trade-off was, um, I'm aware of their problems, but I'm just going to keep ignoring them, and kind of learning like, man, uh, it's not worth it.
yeah.
And
And money is, you know, the root word of scarcity is scared, and so money will always come.
mm-hmm, mm. And it might, and I think I had to accept that it might not at first. Like there might be a recession, but also, what do you want to build over time? And why would you want money but also being miserable? Or why would you want to tolerate, why would you want money but at the sacrifice of things that matter so much more than money? So especially if other team members are being treated wrongly or whatever, there's no justification ultimately for it. And so I would love to promise everybody that if they, especially like an entrepreneur or business owner, that if they deal with the issue, that like then their business will double. But it may not double at first. I can say that I think it will play out over the long haul. And this is what we've been experiencing, that organizational health trumps everything. And that we've been obsessed with health, with healthy culture, healthy team members,
Mhm.
and then cranking up the heat on all of that as well. I learned something. I think the book is called, I've never read it, but the book is, I think, called Management Ethics, or I'll look it up in a second. But maybe it's Ethical Sales. Patrick Bet-David from Valuetainment said that every year he makes his sales team read a book on like ethical management. And every year, it ends up making people quit. And the reason why is also when you crank up, it's kind of like when the light turns on, the cockroaches scatter.
Oh yeah.
And so he uses it kind of as a filtering system. And you just were on my podcast and dropped a bomb about that as soon as a narcissist starts to kind of be exposed, that sort of is what shifts, it starts to shift the relationship, like start
Yeah.
getting. And we very much experienced that, because as we started to crank up culture, crank up health, call out issues, it actually resolved itself pretty quickly. And so was thinking kind of about the same thing. And that was sort of encouraging, because Patrick Bet-David is in hyper growth. He's built and exited an insurance company and now is building a media company. But they're growing pretty fast. And I think that sometimes you realize, well, in the, especially sometimes aren't salespeople, maybe out of compared to any other group, high probability of being narcissists?
Well, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Funny,
And so
David and I have the same agent. We're actually working on doing a podcast swap right now.
it's so cool. And so anyways, that was one little tidbit about him, just at least kind of like an annual cleaning. And that sometimes when you start talking about health and shining a light and creating that up one in a one-on-one environment, in an all team environment, that if that very well might mean some good people leave, it might mean some people get uncomfortable, and good, because you want values and principles and ethics and health to be paramount. And if that pushes out toxic people, thank God.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. I always say defend your light with your life. I mean, that is my new mantra ever since I dealt with the narcissist.
Mm.
Yeah. And everything you're saying is exactly that. So, and both you and your wife have experienced pretty significant health issues.
We have. So the biggest one was, or the biggest thing that hit us, we got married young, 21. We were married for about 2 years before my wife got really sick. And then in 2009, she almost died. So as a young couple, I want to say we're 27 and 28. She's in the hospital for 6 days. There was a botched medical procedure. She got gastroparesis. We eventually learned, which is an idiopathic chronic illness where your vagus nerve is damaged. So your digestion is slowed. And depending on how severe it is, you'll eat, the food will just sit there and then you'll throw it up. And so at one point, she was throwing up 10 to 15 times a day, and her weight dropped so severely that she had to get a feeding tube first in her nose to get her stabilized, and then jejunum, which I believe goes into your upper bowel, but it was placed wrong. So instead of the liquid food going into her the right place, it was filling up her body cavity, which will suffocate your organs and kill you quick.
Man.
And so we were really young couple, 2009. She's in the hospital. And what's wild, Rebecca, was during this exact same time, we had purchased a house and a second house. One was a rental, and one we were house hacking because we didn't have much money. but this was during the Big Short. And so house hacking, I didn't know that term, but we had another family living in the house. We had two roommates just to be able to pay the mortgage. And then the whole housing market crashed while my
Okay.
wife was actually the main breadwinner in these days. She was working at Starbucks, waiting tables at a nicer restaurant in the Pacific Northwest, and was nannying and working four jobs and working for my parents, doing their books in their electrical contracting business. So she was hustling. I'm in ministry and doing a little waiting tables a little bit, and then eventually started my video business. So, anyways, punchline is her health gets under attack, almost dies. We're in the hospital. We're losing our houses. The renter stops paying. We default on that. We have to short sell the house we're in. And then on top of that, the church we were a part of for 7 years, which was a total blessing. Soma North, School of Ministry Arts Northwest. She eventually attended that. And that's kind of where we were building, and lots of good came of it. But there was a real moral failure. Some money was stolen. And actually, come to think of it, there might have been some narcissist aspects to some of the leadership there. There was for sure insecurity. I saw that insecurity kills leaders. I've seen it in multiple situations, makes them horrible leaders. And so you got to deal with insecurity. It's very toxic for your leadership. And so the church fell apart. It went from moving and shaking to just a couple, like 200 people or less, from over 1,000. And because of that moral failure. So like our whole world was falling around us. And we'll talk about, a wild event that really shapes you. And I'll never forget that season, because it was very heavy. But I remember feeling challenged because I was in the hospital room with my wife for 6 days, kind of like, God, what are we going to do? And I really felt challenged in that hospital room, that God was saying, man, you need to man up and step up. You got to provide for your wife. You got to fight for your family. I realized I had the option in like two paths. I could have gone a path of bitterness and just woe is me and kind of that victim path, or I could have gone down the path of, what is the bright side of this? Well, at least at the time, at least I'm healthy. So we married for sickness and health. I can fight. We can solve this. We can look for answers. We could keep praying. We can seek medical answers and just not quit. I heard it said that when you're going through hell, keep going. Like that, one of the worst things to do would have been to park there in our despair. But that is actually was the Genesis kind of moment that pushed me from being a little more passive and complacent in terms of entrepreneurship to sort of like survival. Was like, I'm fighting now to pay medical bills. And so it lit a new fire in me. And that was in 2009. Now it's 2014, and we are, years later, have gone through a lot of ups and downs. She eventually got a gastric stimulator, which is a pacemaker that stimulates the vagus nerve to get your stomach digesting again. She's been in and out of the hospital. She was in the hospital last week. We called it an ambulance so I could stay home with the kids at 1:30 in the morning. And so it's been a wild ride. But what's wild is doctors said we wouldn't be able to have children, and we have two miracle boys. And she is an absolute survivor, strong woman who, it's stunning to me. I know what happens when I get sick. I'm like almost useless. And what she pushes through in regards to pain and energy and everything is absolutely amazing. And I love her so much. So there was that. And then when I was 32, I'm 40 now, I started to develop severe pain in my hands, wrists, forearms from working at a computer. Call it RSI, repetitive stress injury. A lot of computer programmers. Now there's a generation of young kids in their 20s that are esports gamers that are dealing with issues. Listeners probably know carpal tunnel, and tendinitis, tendinosis. It's a whole slew of issues that's mainly from posture, nerve entrapment, different probably in individual cases, and the myofascia in your arms kind of like hardening and shortening and causing different pain and whatnot. So it's been actually a wild journey of, sometimes my pain on a scale from 1 to 10 in my wrists or my pointer finger, my mouse finger, or my hand was like a 10. 2 summers ago, I was slathering my arms with CBD menthol, lotion to after I worked a few hours in the morning, I'd lay in bed and just wonder if if the pain would ever go away. So I've been on a long journey of pursuing traditional doctors has not been helpful. Natural remedies, biohacking, throwing the whole kitchen sink at it, from physical therapy to the EGOS-Q method to red light therapy to a lot of different things. And I'm very grateful that I am actually making progress, getting stronger, and pain reduction is happening. But yeah, as far as both of our as a couple, we've dealt with a lot. And what's wild, I will tell you this, Rebecca, my wife Sonia has said something profound to me. And she said, as we look back over her getting sick, she said, Sean, when I think about it, I wouldn't change it.
Oh, that's amazing.
And I'm like, I would have, I think, but when she says that, I think what that reveals to me a high level of maturity. But what it reveals to me is that sometimes the greatest obstacles in our life, of course, lead us to places we would have never been before. They may, and of course, sometimes the greatest obstacles in our life can crush us, or they can be an opportunity to truly make us better, drive us closer. As chronic illness hits a family, divorce skyrockets statistically. But I think if you can stick with each other, and depending on how each person's wired, I think that we've been stronger because of it. And I would also say it's developing our character. There's something about perseverance, and perseverance leading to hope. You go through hardship and you don't quit. And for my faith belief, these light and momentary troubles are nothing compared to the surpassing glory that awaits us. And so ultimately, yes, we want to be comfortable in this life, and we want to do whatever we can. By the way, one of my motivations, we haven't stopped. One of my motivations to build wealth is to continue to look for and have the opportunity to do, whatever's necessary, like health side. We're a big believer in prayer, and we do the whole thing. And so we just are on that journey, and it's mysterious, but it's also wild, all that, has happened in our lives as a result. And yeah, it's been interesting.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, you guys have been through it. So if you would give any of our listeners, you know, some piece of advice to dealing with um all that you've dealt with, and you've grown a multi-million-dollar business, and you've dealt with narcissists, and you've dealt with chronic pain and illness and all difficult childhood, so many things, what would you tell them right now who are when they're dealing with maybe difficult circumstances?
I mean, I think the first thing I would say is tired eyes rarely see a bright future.
Hmm.
If in this exact moment you're feeling overwhelmed, you've got all this pressure on you, you're in pain, sometimes the best thing to do first is take a nap, take a
Hmm.
break. It's not all going to be fixed overnight, but it's going to be very difficult to think clear or make good decisions from a fatigued state. And that might be, you might be dealing with chronic fatigue. So I think there's just something about, and in our culture is like so busy and there's so much scrolling. I think just disconnecting and actually getting into a refreshed place, because sometimes after a day of business, man, it's like I'm optimistic after my morning routine. And by 8 p.m., I am doom spiraling. You get news and all this stuff. And I'm like, and then I actually realize I wake up the next morning. I'm like, oh, it's not as bad as I thought it was. But all the decision making fatigue and all the things the day threw at me. So first thing is rest and get into a good state to make the decision. I think secondly, um, one of the things that comes to mind in the list of what I would do with that is get connected to a powerful community. For me, I really believe in the power of church as a Christian, finding a powerful Christian church. One fact we can know, no matter what people's faith persuasion, is we need each other. We are designed to need other people. Therapy has shown us, the talk therapy, like, so just talking stuff out in and of itself brings a level of healing. being able to have people to grieve with, mourn with, talk with, process with, people to listen to. And so having a good friend group or having is all great, but I think there's something powerful about committing to a local church. And in doing so, having a practice where, if possible, weekly, you're able to be in an environment of faith, an environment of prayer, an environment of healing, an environment where you get some wisdom from the Bible, an environment so that over the years, personally, my answer is on like my faith is the thing. I've got the 26 things, and I'm a big both and guy. I'm like, yeah, because like faith would actually tell us to go, apply wisdom, but ultimately it's by God's grace that has carried us through, and it's been faith that has been the key to get through the darkest seasons of our life. And the expression of that is also not just a private faith. What's very fascinating about the Bible is a lot of people read it wrong in the West because they do read it from a more individualistic mindset. We are all very isolated and we're individuals, when actually it was written to groups of people. It was written to entire churches, the New Testament epistles, and the whole Old Testament was all very community based. So a communal mindset, there's this whole thing it says, in James, that pray for one another, confess your sins to one another, and pray for one another that you may be healed. Even if you were in a, I believe it's different, but this is why therapy is powerful, because you're confessing issues to somebody, and the talking about it and processing with them, it could be a path to healing. Now, I think that's a level. I think the faith level that invites God into it adds super to the natural wisdom. So I think getting into a community, I'm a big proponent of therapy. And then I also think the mindset is everything is figure outable.
Yeah.
I can share like my mindset in this moment with the pain I'm dealing with that is directly to listeners in this moment. I'm very optimistic about what's happening in my health for many reasons. One, I think I am going to keep trying stuff and I'm going to keep looking. And this is a whole separate probably conversation. I have bought courses and books and massage devices and $500 tennis elbow devices. And I've seen specialists and I've gone, but I would encourage people, just don't keep looking. My thought is the answer is still out there. Deeper than that, specifically for pain, I'm very optimistic. There's a book by Tony Robbins and a lot of doctors called Life Force. And we're in a medical revolution, and a lot of it's not super mainstream yet, but we're living through kind of this idea that like it's all perspective. Everything is perspective. So I could say, man, it sucks that I'm in pain, and it's true. And I just had my 40th birthday, and it's been a bummer to deal with pain at varying degrees over the last 8 years. There's other things that like go back 100 years and everyone would have been dead by 40 because they didn't know how to sanitize.
And that's how it was for years.
Yeah, they didn't know how to sanitize medical devices. So we feel, I think, avoid, like, be careful with your social media consumption and comparison, because these days there's just so much of we have too much information about what's happening around the world. We compare ourselves to others. You really got to run your own race. And so in saying that, being optimistic about, rather than being sad that it's over, be happy that it happened. So being grateful for, like, of course, I want my wife and I to be strong and healthy for many years to come. And that is my belief. But I like to live from a place of like, what about all the memories we have had, all the good we have had? And it always could be worse. It's a true perspective, kind of across the board. And so I actually really do believe that year over year, there are new discoveries and new things happening. And so it's like, never give up hope. Like, don't stop hoping. Don't stop looking for answers. If that's why they say, get a second opinion, get an 100th opinion, keep looking. And sometimes it's patience. There are certain business things entrepreneurs want to solve, but the software didn't exist yet. The solution didn't exist yet. The fuel source didn't exist yet to make the rocket to go to Mars. Oh, now it does. And now that solution can happen. So if you can hang in there and protect your mindset and protect your heart, get into a community, stay rested so you're not catastrophizing everything, and keep going, then I do believe everything is figure outable. And then I also know that life is about mystery for those of faith. I mean, I believe I've seen miracles happen, and people get prayed for and get healed. But obviously, sometimes people are prayed for and they are not. It's a mystery, but we're going to keep praying and we're going to keep searching. We're going to keep, studying, and we're going to stay in community, and then try to stay grateful for what we do have in the moments. We've had to modify our schedule because of maybe being in the hospital at certain times, modify what we're able to do. And so you could get on social media and be like, oh man, it must be nice for that person who's not dealing with this. Well, yeah, true. But that's not your circumstances. If you maybe look at life through a different set of lenses today, you might start seeing there's all kinds of opportunity in your backyard, in your living room, wherever you're constrained to. And that would be about making the most about what you have. And those are just a few thoughts that have maybe been helpful for me as we've done what we've done
Yeah,
over the
I
years.
think it's
So
really good. I mean, you're saying like whether you think you can or you can't, you're right.
yeah,
You know, I mean, I always say they only win if you give in, right? I mean, you just have to believe it.
that's a good one. Don't quit. And I think about Galatians, do not get weary in doing good, for we will reap a harvest at the proper time if we do not give up. So I always try to judge my life not by the harvest I'm reaping, but by the seeds that I'm sowing. And what that actually means is I'm actually learning when it comes to my hands and wrists, and I have a physical therapist, that I actually have to do the workouts. I have to do the stretching. I'm moving my shoulder back by putting a little door thing for the exercise band in the door jamb and pulling my shoulder back throughout the day.
Wow.
And I'll get like hand pain and different things. And my physical therapist will tell me, well, like if your muscle tissues and the way your things are, if you took like 4 breaks a day for 5 to 10 minutes and did these exercises I'm giving you, it would really keep the nerve pain and some things down, and you'd really be correcting your whole like kind of deal. Well, I got to confess, Rebecca, 5 days can go by and I haven't done a thing. So also don't complain about the results you didn't get from the work you didn't do.
Yeah, so true.
And when it comes to planting seeds, it makes me think, okay, so in order to address my health, I'm just going to plant. I don't know what the result will be. I don't know what the harvest will be, but I know if I do repeatedly plant seeds, hydration, exercise, posture, stretching, nutrition, if I plant those seeds, well, then I wake up and I'm like, oh my goodness, there's an abundant harvest. And that could be discipline, investing in your marriage, being thoughtful, all these little choices, all these little things that we do. And I do take extreme responsibility, because sometimes I'm like, oh man, the pain has flared up again. Stuff is happening again. And what am I blaming that on? Well, yeah, it sucks that that's something I'm dealing with, but I've neglected even the prescribed solutions that I've now discovered. And so I think would encourage uh, everyone as well that, like, yeah, don't judge your life by the harvest you're reaping, judge your life by the seeds that you're sowing. And sometimes we don't want that because we want results fast, because the process of seed time and harvest is not an overnight thing. It is plant, water, wait, and in due season a harvest happens. And sometimes you build momentum in a field, in agriculture and farming, where year after year you compound it, because the soil and the nutrition in the soil and the way that it all compounds. So anybody that's maybe built momentum in a business, in a life, in a marriage, in a relationship, of course, if we reverse engineered it was not gotten there by accident. A million small investments have compounded like interest over time to create the love and the wealth and the abundance and the energy and the positive aspects that are happening because of the compound effect over time.
Wow. Well, this is so good. Where can people learn more about you and follow you and all that good stuff? I know they're going to want to learn more.
Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, Sean Cannell rhymes with YouTube channel. My first and last name is who I am across social media. And then our company name is Think Media. That's our main YouTube channel and the Think Media podcast. And so really our content is for anybody that, if they said, man, I want to start doing what you're doing. I mean, it's inspiring to see how you started your YouTube channel. You were just on our show, even talking about it's really, you don't need the highest production value, but if you got a message to share, you've got some good information, you're a subject matter expert. An expert's even an intimidating word. You figured something out. You figured out your way of doing it, and you know you could help other people. Man, YouTube needs you. Like, people need you more than that. YouTube is a vehicle to get your message out to the world. It's the second largest search engine. It can be very powerful. It can be lucrative. But one of your quotes was, "It's really more about the mission than it is about money." And it's like, yeah, absolutely. And we see YouTube as a chance to solve problems, answer specific questions, get good information out there. Of course, there's the entertainment side, and that's how we help people. So whether it's figuring out the technical things, you find that on our Think Media channel, or whether you're interested in just exploring, starting, or growing a YouTube channel, our Think Media podcast is pretty good, and it's on all the audio platforms. It's called Think Media Podcast, or video as well on YouTube.
All right. And it's Sean, Sean is the way he spells it. And definitely pick up a copy of his book. All the links will be in the show notes. And thank you so much, Sean. This was so, so good. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Appreciate you so much.
Thank you.